Good evening, all. Do I go next year? I'm really bad with technology. It's very humbling to be speaking in front of so many passionate, creative, and innovative people. I'm not very creative, but I am passionate, and I'm passionate about equality and justice. And behind my story, behind my passion, there is a story. So I'll share that with you. I'm originally Kurdish. We are the world's largest nation without a state. There are approximately 40 million Kurds around the world. So that's the region. It's split between Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. My parents are political activists or freedom fighters, depending on which side you're on. They fought against the persecution of Kurds, they fought for Kurdish rights, and they fought for Kurdish independence. In the 80s, it was a dangerous period for Kurds. With the Iran-Iraq tension, Saddam Hussein's genocidal campaign against the Kurds, and all vestige of Kurdish existence banned in Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. So my parents were forced with the decision to either escape or risk death. They found themselves illegally crossing the border in the back of cargo trucks into Pakistan, where UN presence provided a beacon of hope. They were promised it would be 6 months before they were resettled, and it ended up being 9 years. There's me. So I didn't choose to be a refugee, but I was born as a refugee in a United Nations refugee camp in Pakistan. I've experienced life firsthand as a refugee in crowded UN camps, the unpredictability of life, the constant threat of danger, not knowing where or when you're going next, whether you'll have access to basic fundamental rights such as food, water, shelter, let alone education. The mass protests, abuse at the hands of authorities, and seeing my father imprisoned for just peaceful protesting, and then That's okay. And my mum selling all her jewellery just to provide for us, and seeing people die literally from hunger strikes. And this is all as a child. How many of you in the room have a sibling? Cool. So if your parents had to pick only one of you to go to school, how would they make that decision? Because the reality for refugees is that only 1 out of 2 children can get access to education. We take for granted how fortunate we are in New Zealand to have the option to go to school, the option to go to university, and the option to choose meaningful and careers of our choice to pursue. Millions of people worldwide would literally do anything to be in our position. And when children are forced to flee, often they miss years of schooling. And without education, an entire generation is at risk. When I first came to New Zealand, I didn't speak a word of English. It was my 4th language and 4th alphabet. So it was quite intimidating, but what I was really shocked about was that we weren't beaten. We weren't learning due to fear. Because in Pakistan, we learnt due to fear. We were beaten with sticks. And I remember being dragged around the classroom for getting the pronunciation of a word wrong. So I quickly realised New Zealand was a really safe place, and I enjoyed learning when I wasn't being forced or threatened to learn. Had I not been resettled in New Zealand, I could have easily just been a statistic. A statistic about how many refugees are fleeing every day trying to reach safety. A statistic about how many young children don't have enough food, shelter, or water to survive. A statistic about how many refugees die trying to reach safety. So I feel I'm in a position of privilege to be able to determine my own future, and having been resettled in New Zealand, being able to get an education. But at the same time, I feel that it's my obligation to provide a voice for all of those voiceless people. So my speech being 8 minutes, you can probably work out the math because maths is not my thing. But quite a lot of people displaced just in that time I've been standing here speaking. I realized my true passion for helping people when I spent some time working at the UN in Kenya. I worked on housing and slum upgrading projects for Kibera, the world's largest slum. When I was sitting in the office on my computer, it didn't really feel like I was making a difference at all, but I only realized how the pieces all fit together, and together it can make a change and a big difference when I visited Kibera and saw all those, the people we were making these projects for and trying to get their slums upgraded. And I realized that we might play a very, very minor role, but when the pieces all come together, the bigger picture is extraordinary. So, as Kola mentioned, I've been helping the University of Auckland launch a refugee scholarship, and we've raised enough funds to be able to provide 3 scholarships for the next 6 years per year. So that's pretty exciting. And I recently represented New Zealand at the Global Refugee Youth Consultations in Geneva. And in Geneva, I met 2 young Congolese refugees who lived in refugee camps in Uganda. These 2 young men formed a group, Kobarwa's International, Kobarwa's International Youth Organization to Transform Africa. So in 2005, only 3 young refugees had made it to senior 5. And today, when I met them in Geneva, they told me over 600 people had made it to secondary school because of their program. So this is just one example of youth leadership and practice and the potential that youth have when they get together and try to implement their ideas. And it just got me thinking, they did this literally from their refugee camp with limited funding, and in a place like New Zealand. Imagine what we could achieve. So since then, I have been feeling inspired and trying to come up with something to help the refugee youth here, because there is a serious underrepresentation of refugees in secondary school at the end, so year 12, year 13. They all seem to drop out around year 11, and even fewer that make it to university or beyond that. So we've launched this, hasn't officially launched, but this mentoring program to try address that, and would target refugee students in high school before they've dropped out to try see if there's a way we can encourage them to pursue further education, or just to see what it is that they want to pursue and how we can help them. Because it's usually the simple things like enrollment, applications, what papers to pick, or even what degree to enroll in, that can be really intimidating for people that don't have anyone in their family that's ever even finished secondary school, let alone made it to university. So carrying on from the theme that's been kind of going, being a champion of change, what really pisses me off is about youth when they throw around buzzwords like the future leaders. Because in my opinion, we already are leaders. We're already in a position to make a difference, and how big or small that may be, that's up to us. But we can all start thinking about what it is, what role we can play in our communities, and what we can do to make a difference in the world we live in. So, champions are people prepared to face difficulty. These are young champions. People prepared to face difficulty. They're defined by strength, passion, confidence, all that kind of thing. And when empowered and passionate people come together, we can transform societies, and we can all be champions of change. So be a champion of change. Thank you.